I'm very excited about today's guest, someone I know personally very well. During today's podcast, we explore the remarkable journey of Dr. Saeeda Jaffar. We really want to get to know who's Dr. Saeeda as Dr. Saeeda in time.
We have more than 4 billion cards. More than that when it comes to credentials across the world. Most important thing has been follow my passion. And that's what I would say to anyone out there. Really follow your passion. What works for one doesn't necessarily work for another, and that's okay because we all have different things that drive us. Follow your passion. That will be the first thing. As somebody who is an executive on the job, there are 1,000 decisions that need to be made. Big decisions, small decisions. You just simply don't have enough time or resources to be able to do that. And I think the one big learning I had in my very early days was decisions need to be made, right? And taking too long to make a decision is also a decision, which can have its own consequences. So you need to be able to step back and say, which are decisions that I'm okay to make at this point, given the information that I have, and which are the really consequential decisions where I need to step back, take the time, and really delve deep into it.
We're really excited to have you a part of this podcast.
Pleasure being here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So, Dr. Saeeda, as you know, this podcast is about an impact in this part of the world. When I say this part of the world is Middle East and GCC. We really genuinely want to get to know the inspiring leaders, to learn from them, get inspired by them, and really try to figure out how they think and why they're doing what they're currently doing. So before we go into the impact part, we really want to get to know who's Dr. Saeeda as Dr. Saeeda. Before she was a doctor, before she was a mother, before she went to Boston University. And we want to really, like you always tell me, take a step back in time and try to figure out your life journey and understand and embrace ourselves in your mindset, and really, if you can elaborate on that, your whole journey through until now, that would be highly appreciated.
Happy to. Look, I think I'll share with you where I started from, and that's probably what will give you the biggest clue as to where I am today. I'm the youngest child. So I grew up being the youngest and being the only girl in the family.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
2 older brothers.
3.
3.
Yeah, that's right. It was, and I quote, the best of times, and it was, oh boy, was it a difficult time. So it was a fun household to grow up in because there was always people around. There was always someone to kind of give you a hard time. But there were always also expectations. And the 3 boys did incredibly well, mashallah, in school. So the bar was always set very, very high. And had a very normal, very usual upbringing with one key, I guess, difference, which was the expectation always was, the guys are doing it when it comes to school. You should be able to do the same, if not better, right?
Yeah.
And the problem with having really smart brothers is no matter how well you did, they'd always done it. They'd already done it better. So that was, let's say, the background in which I grew up. And as I'm going up there, I loved math. Everyone in my family always loved science and math. And I grew up learning and loving science and math. And that's kind of what I pursued as I got older. I went to university to be an engineer. I did my undergraduate as well as graduate work in engineering. I'm a chemical engineer by training. Absolutely loved it, loved the rigor and the structure of being able to think and act like an engineer, as you know.
Yep.
When it came to work, looked at multiple options, but loved, again, that rigor and that structure of consulting. I felt that's what resonated with me more than anything else. I was passionate about it, right? It worked. It was a lot of work, engineering, consulting, you name it, but it was something I really, really enjoyed. So right out of finishing grad school, I went over to, I started work as a consultant. I was with McKinsey for a few years in the US, then moved back here to the region, spent some time with Bain, and then at Alvarez and Marcel. So I was in consulting for about 17 years, more or less. And then a couple of years ago, moved over to the tech world and I'm now with Visa running the GCC.
Amazing, amazing. So I got a chance to work with you for 5 years, and I can see when you say rigor and structure. Would you say, is it a typical career for an Emirati woman to go into that world and work those crazy hours and really try to compete with mainly more male-dominated industry?
So I think in today's world, there is no typical path for an Emirati woman, or frankly, I would say any woman. Yeah. The path is a path you chart for yourself. It's the path that you are most passionate about. And we are truly lucky and blessed to live in both these times and this place that affords us the opportunity and the ability to do that.
True.
It was perhaps a little bit less, I would say, common. Right? Yeah. It was always there. It was always possible, but it was just a little bit less common a few years ago. But now, today, I mean, I see Emirati and other women in every different walk of life that we look at today, be it the banking, the engineering, technology, aerospace, you name it, right? I think those divisions we don't see anymore.
Yes, I agree. So how was your transition from the consulting world where you're an advisor to going to the industry side or tech world where you're actually not an advisor anymore and really, well, with Alvarez, you used also to do transformations yourself. But did you feel a transition in that space, and how was that, if you can elaborate on it?
Fascinating. It was fascinating. It was... it's one of those things where they say the best way to learn how to swim is to jump into a pond.
Sure.
Yes, you can read 1,000 books, but when you jump in, it's very different. That's what it was. It's a very different world, and it's a very different level of responsibility. Yeah. And it's a very different pace of decision-making. As an advisor, you always have the time to step back and to look and to consider and to really and truly delve deep into the analysis and to get to the data and do all that.
Sure.
As an operator, as somebody who is an executive on the job, there are 1,000 decisions that need to be made. Big decisions, small decisions. And you just simply don't have enough time or resources to be able to do that. And I think the one big learning I had in my very early days was decisions need to be made, right? And taking too long to make a decision is also a decision, which can have its own consequences. So you need to be able to step back and say, which are decisions that I'm okay to make at this point, given the information that I have, and which are the really consequential decisions where I need to step back, take the time, and really delve deep into it. I think that was probably the most important thing and the most critical thing, that you almost need to operate at two levels, right? There is a slower, more strategic level that you can take your time, but then there is a much faster, much more get things done mode, which, frankly, if you don't do, you're holding up the business.
I agree again. So within Visa, you're doing a lot in the region as a Visa. So me personally, I know all about Visa. I'm assuming all our listeners know Visa, but you always hear the bigger picture of Visa. Can you just elaborate on the Visa in the region, what you're trying to do, and what initiatives are you actually pursuing right now?
So look, globally, most people know Visa. Okay. Most people have Visa, and their wallets are on their phones. 2, 3, multiple. That's good. Well done. Visa is, look, we're a global payments technology provider. Everybody knows that. But I think Visa as an organization is changing and evolving. And when I think of Visa, I really and truly think about a few things. We are a purpose-led organization, above and beyond. We believe that economies that include everyone uplift everyone. Yeah. We fundamentally want to create a level playing field and an inclusive ecosystem so that everybody has the ability to participate in the global financial network, if you want. Today, if you look at it, we have more than 4 billion cards. More than that when it comes to credentials. across the world.
That's huge impact.
That's huge. That being said, we still believe there are many individuals that are not yet in the financial fold. So that is top of mind for us.
True.
Equally, we think if you look at it on the SME side, there are many, even though today we have about 100 million merchants that are on our platforms, that are with us, there are many small, medium enterprises that are not yet part of the financial fold. So for us, it's extremely important to be able to create an ecosystem that opens up and allows those that are not yet in the financial fold to become a part of this.
And if you don't mind me asking, how? Because I'm assuming you have like 3 pillars or any certain pillars that you're focusing on.
We do.
Can you elaborate?
We do. So if I look at just this part, if I look at inclusion, we are involved in multiple different initiatives. I'll give you an example, right? I mean, we've run something called She's Next.
Okay.
She's Next is a program for women entrepreneurs. And we've been running it globally for many years. This year, we ran it in all 6 GCC countries, for the first time in all 6 GCC countries. And we had close to 1,000 women participate. And to participate, you need to be a women-owned or a women-led entrepreneur or a small business or a startup. And we had so many incredibly talented women that participated. And the idea is very simple. Come in and we run a program, and the winners of the program would get access to, 1, a little bit of some capital. Number 2 is our networks and our partnerships. And number 3, mentorship.
Okay.
Right. So we created this program and we ran it across the region, and now we have our cohort of women entrepreneurs, She's Next winners that are out there trailblazing.
That's amazing. Where did you see the demand coming in? Because I find it fascinating when companies really try to empower SMEs or entrepreneurs, but then the question comes, why specifically women? I know you're passionate about women empowerment, so just want to know if you can elaborate on that.
Yeah. So you're right. I am personally very passionate about women empowerment. I also believe, based on a lot of research, a lot of data that we've done, we've looked through, there is a gap in terms of women being able to find funding and women being able to find the same opportunities. Again, doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It's just that today we see a gap. So we decided, when we were looking at this from a global perspective, this was one of the areas we wanted to focus in on. We do look at many other areas. We look at innovative startups. We look at tech startups. So we also look at multiple other areas. But I think the women area, women startup, is something that was very near and dear to our hearts as an organization, but also to me. And I think if I also reflect upon the priorities we have in our region, women empowerment is something that has really garnered a lot of attention in the last few years. And this is an area that we're, as a society, focusing on. So, again, another reason where this felt very dear to my heart.
I love it. From an impact perspective, with podcasts about, that's tremendous. Do we have any numbers of how much? I know you said 1,000 this year.
Close to it.
Close to it. Yeah. How long has this initiative been running?
So this is our, I believe, 7th time that we did. We usually do this annually. I think we took a small pause during COVID, but this is about the 7th time that we did it. Again, globally speaking. In the region, this was the 2nd time, I believe, or the 3rd time we did it. And, many more to come, inshallah.
That's amazing. Looking forward.
Yeah, and what's been really interesting is that a lot of these winners then go on to become champions.
Creates a ripple effect.
Exactly right. And then a lot of these women, we will actually work with them and see what we can do. So, and these are varied, in terms of the businesses that they do, they're very varied. So some are more focused on sustainability, others are more focused on providing inclusive employment, and others are focused on gifting, right? So it's a very wide spectrum. And then as and where we can, we actually try to pull them in and not only leverage their services internally, but also through our partner network. So it's been fascinating.
So you help them like kind of a private equity model. You're supporting them to get in touch with your partner.
Wherever we can.
Okay, that's amazing. Yeah. So besides the impact part, I know Visa is a huge innovation player in the region and across the world. What are the current initiatives you're focusing on right now in this part of the world?
Sure. Innovation is fundamentally core to what we do, right? We often call ourselves the first fintech from so many years ago. Innovation is something we continue to do. And what's equally important is this part of the world is so incredibly at the forefront of innovation. It can be quite mind-boggling. And I'll share one statistic with you, right? I think one of the, let's say, more cutting-edge elements of payments are contactless payments. If you go across the world, even though we take it for granted in our part of the world, it is not the same all across the world. Our region has probably some of the highest penetration of contactless payments. So face-to-face, if you and I go someplace to a coffee shop or shopping or something, more than 95% of the payments in majority of the countries in the GCC are contactless. That is amongst the highest in the world. You don't see that in other places, right? So innovation comes here quickly. We are, as a society, are young and extremely tech savvy. And as a result of that, we adapt quickly. And as a result of that, we are bringing more and more innovation to this part of the world. And we are starting to experiment in this part of the world. I'll give you another example.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
I got interested. Tell me more.
I'll give you one more example. So there is, we all know installments, right? I'm sure you may have even used installments at some point, across the world as well as locally. So with the Tamaras and the Tabbies locally, perhaps more of the Klarnas and the Afterways across the world.
Yeah.
And their model is, they're a fintech and they provide credit on installments. Today, we have technology that allows every Visa credential to be used at the point of sale, not after, at the point of sale, to be used as either your traditional line of credit, which is a credit card, or an installment. What does that mean? I want to buy something. I buy something for let's say 10,000 dirhams or riyals. And when I am checking out at the counter, I can say, instead of putting this on my line of credit, I want to pay it in 4 or pay it in 6 over the next certain number of months. So it's preset, it's predefined. I have the visibility. We have the technology. We're rolling it out across the country in the UAE. We're starting with the UAE, and Saudi is going to be up next. But we're rolling it out across the country. So soon you will be able to go and you will be able to just use your credential without having to do anything else. And you will have access to that. That's pretty fascinating. That's amazing. That's amazing technology. So things like this, we're doing more and more of, and you'll continue to see more innovation come out of Visa over the next few years.
I personally didn't know that so that's fascinating that you shared that with us. How do you see the GCC countries playing together in that innovation space and in the other elements?
Sure. So look, I think there are a lot of commonalities between the GCC countries, and then there are probably certain differences as well. So as a commonality, the GCC countries tend to have populations that are very young.
Sure.
Right? I mean, look at Saudi, where I think 60% is below 35, which is not unusual across the GCC. There's a high proportion of expats across the GCC. UAE probably more at 85% or so. But, again, you see that across the country. So there are a lot of commonalities. They're extremely tech savvy. If you look at a place like Qatar, they have one of the highest penetration of internet and smartphone usage in the world. So they're extremely young, extremely tech savvy, extremely diverse, and frankly, quite affluent. So you see these commonalities across the countries. But then there are also differences, right? There are some countries that are larger. Saudi has a population above 30 million, 35 million, 38 million people. There are other countries that are smaller, that are about 1 million. So I think there's differences in size, just from a population basis. But there's also differences in size from a geographical spread basis, right? We have countries that are, again, Saudi, which is a very large geographical footprint, which means, yes, while there are concentrated centers like Riyadh, there's also a large population that's spread out over a large landmass versus other countries that are much more concentrated into smaller areas, smaller cities. So I think we see really we see a lot of commonalities, but then we also see some significant differences. And what we try to do is we say, for every country, while there are a lot of commonalities, there are probably certain unique features that make them more suitable for some things versus others. And based on that, we try to tailor and we try to provide services that are most relevant to that or country in that specific context.
Good. So how is Visa generally working and committed to the region with, as you said, customizing their offering to each country?
Yeah. So Visa has been in the region for a very, very long time and will continue to be in the region for a very, very long time. Visa is deeply, deeply, deeply committed to the long term. We've been in the region for more than 40 years. In fact, we're going to be celebrating our 40 years in Saudi.
Congratulations.
This year. Thank you. Thank you. It's, we were one of the first, if we were the first card to be produced in the countries. And look, it's been an incredible journey because through those years, we've seen the ecosystem grow and evolve. And we've seen payments go from predominantly cash to today, predominantly digital. There's still room, there's still ways to go, but we are looking at close to 65+% digital payments. Cashless across the region. So there's, again, as I said, there's still room to go, but I think the journey we've been on has just been incredible and tremendous. And like everything else, when the GCC gets going, the GCC gets going.
They run.
You know? So so the last 3 years, we've seen this incredible cash conversion and just incredible move towards e-com, towards much more digital forms of payment, towards mobile payments, towards contactless payments. So we see it, and we can see that in the next 5 to 10 years, we will leapfrog, and we will leapfrog the rest of the world in terms of how fast and how digital we are going when it comes to payments.
That's tremendous. You're touching a lot of people's life by basically doing that. Right?
I mean, how many times a day do you make a payment?
Too many, unfortunately. So if you look to the future, Dr. Saeeda, we have obviously geopolitical situations happening around us, but there's still tremendous stability within the region. How does Visa see the whole region going? What is the direction going forward for Visa in the region?
Yeah. So we have a very consistent strategy across the world.
Yeah.
And again, the nuances of that strategy will vary based on where we are, but I think our strategy is fairly consistent. Our focus, our core is consumer flows.
Yeah.
We still think there is a long way to go in consumer flows. So digitizing that flow, innovating that flow, and making sure we provide the best, most secure, most innovative, seamless customer experiences for capturing that consumer payment, right? That's our first core.
Yeah.
But equally important, there are many, many, many other forms of money movement that are out there. There's B2B payments, right? There are government payments. There are person-to-person payments. There are so many other forms of payments that yet remain to be captured. That's a very large area of growth for us. And that is absolutely an area that we are focused on in the future. And then the third element is around value-added services, because the core payment is one part. But more and more important in today's world is to be able to provide that security, to be able to provide that peace of mind which says, I know my transaction is safe. I am not going to be taken advantage of in some shape or form. So that's critical, to be able to provide that incredible customer experience, to be able to provide the institutions the ability to leverage the data responsibly. Again, to provide more secure and more relevant customer experience. So all these value-added services that are extremely critical and becoming even more important, that's the third leg for us, to be able to provide those value-added services across all kinds of payments. So that's our broad strategy, which is around the core consumer flows. It's around the other flows, payment flows, as well as the value-added services that we think of. Now, how we translate this into the region, again, varies. Even in the GCC, some countries have more digitized consumer flows than others. Some have more opportunity for other flows. So it just varies. And those are the big three pillars.
So if you talk to, let's say, the listeners right now, let's say we have some younger folks listening to this, what would you tell them? Because I saw lots of opportunities in a lot of part of in the GCC. What would you tell them are key important factors to consider in their career going forward, for example?
In terms of how they want to think about where they are?
Yes, how they think technology playing a big part in their going to play a big part in their life.
Yeah. Look, I think technology is just evolving so fast. And I feel very old when I say this, but it genuinely accelerates every few years. And every few years I hear myself saying, but it's never been at this pace before.
Yeah.
And it's right, but that's just how fast things are changing. And I think there's no real distinction between technology and business, the way that it used to be. The lines are blurred, and the ability to create a proposition is intrinsically linked to the technologies that are available and our abilities to be able to leverage those technology pool. So I think having the debate on whether it's important or not important, I'm not sure is really as relevant today as it was perhaps many years ago. Today, it's much more around which technologies are relevant and how do we spend our time on balancing between technology and the business aspect. I think there's a ton that's going on in AI today.
Yep.
I think that's just starting to see what AI and generative AI in particular can do in the world. AI is something that's, by the way, not new to us. I mean, we've been, as Visa, we've been using AI for 30 years. I'm not kidding, we celebrated the 30-year anniversary of Visa using artificial intelligence back in the day when it wasn't even called artificial intelligence.
Sure.
Every single transaction that's done today, every time you either tap or swipe your card or your phone, we capture 500 unique characteristics of that transaction. We run our models, our AI models on that, and get a response back to the issuers around around the level of safety, security, et cetera, all within seconds, right? So there's some milliseconds. So this is something that has been going on for us for a long time, but this is something that I think will continue to shape the world as we go. So that's, I think, Gen AI, I would put top of the list at this point.
So you would say, back at tech skills is an important thing to consider?
I think tech skills are important, and the ability to understand that tech and business are essentially so linked that they're two sides of the same coin at this point. It's very difficult to make real, concrete, complex business decisions without understanding the tech part of it, because the two are becoming more and more interlinked. And I'm talking more about technologies of the future.
Correct.
Right? I'm talking about the business models of the future.
So if Dr. Saeeda, years ago, when you were a child, looks at Dr. Saeeda right now, what would she tell herself?
What would I tell myself? I would probably say that what's worked for me, what has been the most important thing has been follow my passion. And that's what I would say to anyone out there. Really follow your passion. What works for one doesn't necessarily work for another, and that's okay, because we all have different things that drive us. Follow your passion. That would be the first thing. The second thing I would say is there is absolutely no substitute for hard work. You're gonna have to put in the time. You're gonna have to grind. That's the only way we learn, or at least for me, it has been. So don't expect to just wake up one day and it's all done. We just have to kind of go through it. And the third thing I would say is know your people. Nobody does it alone. Nobody. At every point in your life, you need people who are your mentors, your coaches, your friends, your peers, and people you can give back to. People who you can mentor, people who you can help. So you gotta remember that life is a team sport, and you gotta have your people around you. And you gotta be other people's people.
True.
Yeah, that's what I would say.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. I'm pretty sure the listeners really learned a lot about your impact, all the things you're doing. And I hope they can embrace themselves and really learn from that podcast and take it forward. And hopefully we have inspiring leaders in the future.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure.